Okay, so there's a couple of things we need to talk about with the Harvey Elliott transfer. And the first one, I think, is price. Don't get me wrong, the price was always going to be good for Harvey Elliott. We knew it was going to be about 35 to 50 million and probably settling around 40 with probably a buyback clause. But Liverpool have now set it. And it is 40 million with a 50 million buyback clause. And that's probably what we're going to be looking at, right? I think that's a fairly reasonable rate in this current market, considering, first of all, if you're selling within the Premier League, the guy is homegrown. But secondly, you're also getting a game changer of a player who, if you play with the right system, would be very suited to whatever it is you're trying to do. I don't think football's passed Harvey Elliott on. I think certainly there are people in football who want someone who plays in the position of Harvey Elliott, but it's just you're going to have to go to the right team. And I think a lot of people don't really think about team or system fit with a lot of the very top end players. They just go, wow, that guy's just good. And so it's assumed that if you need the right system, then therefore there's kind of a deficiency to you. And I don't think Harvey Elliott has a deficiency to him in terms of game. If you were to identify something, I think Liverpool probably would have thought he might grow a little more, or that maybe there's kind of a strength issue there. But let's be real, like Liverpool have just signed a whole bunch of guys who are quite short, and I don't think we worry all that much about height, though maybe in midfield we do worry about height. Maybe in the flanks we don't worry so much about height. And I think that is a bit of a thing. Like there are profiles that fit in certain areas. And weirdly, I think if Harvey had been slightly quicker, we probably will be looking at this like amazing number 10 come winger type. But since we've seen Florian Wirtz, someone of a very similar age to him, very similar profile in terms of the area of the field that he takes up, that's probably a mirror image on the left where Harvey's more on the right. And ultimately what it means is, and I think based on the experience with Slot last season, he knows he's not going to get that first team football, and so it's time for him to move on. And I think to an extent that's fair enough, right? It's not that we want to get rid of him, it's that he wants to progress and we can't offer that progression. So let's see where you can progress elsewhere. Fair enough, at least from my perspective anyway. So on top of that, right, I think that then takes me into a series of questions around Liverpool's squad building or squad changes. We've spoken of a summer of consolidation. At the moment, we're speaking about Konate possibly moving on, Núñez, Diaz is being rocked around for about 85 million. We've got a midfield where we're looking at moving on Harvey Elliott. We've moved on Trent Alexander-Arnold. We're probably going to move on a left back. I don't think we're going to look at moving on any other midfielders. And people like Endo have said they're very happy to stay and compete within that team, which for me feels right and good. And to an extent, he was a human victory cigar last season. So what can he be this season? And then I think out wide, broadly, we'll keep either one. I think it's probably Gakpo we're keeping, but I think we're good there, right? What that means, though, is that Liverpool will still be looking for a left winger because we're not going to look for a right winger to rotate with Mo Salah, at least at this point in his career, at least this season in his career. I think on top of that, just going to be honest, I think a left winger and a striker are kind of that's a bit it feels like one would be great. Two would be a complete window for me and would feel like a complete squad overhaul. I spoke about this at the beginning of last season under Slot and kind of the surprises that were to come, or the unpleasant kind of understanding that we were going to come to, that a lot of this Liverpool squad was going to move on maybe sooner than we felt comfortable with. And at the time, there were a lot of people that were like, no, I can't believe it. And I got pretty badly abused in the comments for sort of calling that out. But since it's kind of come to pass, Trent has moved on. We bought him Frimpong. Great. Andy Robertson or Tsimikas, probably Tsimikas, will move on. We're bringing in Kirkes. I'm fine with that. There's the look with Alisson, though I've got to admit, again, Mamardashvili, I said it in my other video. I don't know, where do we go with him? And then I think in the midfield, we're going to stick. And then up front, genuinely, outside of Mo Salah, any of those guys could go. Chiesa could be moving to Italy. We could be looking at Jota moving on to any other Premier League side or any side in Europe. We could be looking at someone along the lines of Diaz or Núñez moving on, preferably both. But all of that leads me to conclude that we do not have a deep enough team, at least with the squad that we're looking at right now. And so what we'll have to do is to promote from within. Ngumoa, I'll be interested to see if Ben Doak stays. Tyler Morton, Trainioni has just signed a new contract, though I've got to admit, even in the press release that went with that and the words, it was kind of, it remains to be seen what his future is at the club, at least this season, in terms of his development. We got minimal minutes for him last year, and there were a couple of people who had minimal minutes and kind of shone in a few of those moments, but that can leave you with unrealistic expectations of what is to come from those players. But it can also just leave you with a bit of, well, do we really have the depth? And the consolidation that we're doing right now is good. I think the plan A that we're working on is an excellent plan A. And the variability within that plan A, it's good, right? But I think within that, we are going to need to find some more squad players. There's still massive questions over so many of the younger guys. I don't think Dan's feels like he has a direct route into the team. I don't think Doak does. And Ungamoa, maybe in the long run. There's a couple of people we're signing where you're like, that's potential, but it's not finished products. It's not, hey, let's go and get another title this season. It's kind of like signing Harvey Elliott at the start of Harvey Elliott, right? Like that's what Ungamoa is to me. He's kind of the beginning, like a variation on what Harvey Elliott was at that time. In terms of just being able to offer something explosive and different, and he's young and creative and fearless and all those things, but it doesn't make him the finished product, and it doesn't make him, Slot will probably acknowledge Harvey Elliott probably did warrant more minutes from the effort he put in last season, but where did he fit? Where does he fit in terms of hierarchy? All these kind of things. And I guess my concern, I'm at the moment scripting a video of like 5 things that would go wrong if Liverpool's season was to go wrong, just because I think you've got to be aware of those things, right? But a big one for me is squad depth. A big one for me is squad adaptability and that ability to break down opposition. When you've been worked out, to work them out. When you've been worked out, to morph, to change, to adapt. And I know Wirtz, Kerkez, Frimpong, Salah, they're all adaptable players, though very often you do find Salah tails off towards the end of the season because a lot of people have begun to work out elements of his game. But that's not the point. The point is, it's a very strong point, I think. Depth doesn't feel as apparent when you move on. Elliott, someone who's a massive game changer in that cup final for us earlier this season. Chiesa, the goal scorer from that cup final earlier this season. We started last season with 6 attackers. We could start next season with as few as 4, as many as 6, but I think probably the biting point of 5, and then the youth, right? So it's not that I don't trust the process. I think there certainly is a process there to be followed. And I think this season is very much about consolidation. And to an extent, I think we're seeing, with Harvey Elliott being the player that Liverpool are moving on at this point for 50 million, if he hadn't have been around this brilliant finishing school, because he was so advanced, and he was a very advanced player when he came in, he clearly had the chops, and he clearly still does. But if he hadn't have been around that brilliant finishing school in this period, would he be worth 50 million? If he'd gone somewhere else to progress, would he have possibly taken a different career route? We see Fabio Carvalho shipped out of Liverpool and on to Brentford, and Brentford now selling him on for a much lower fee. It's not an indictment of these people. I'm sure they're nice people. I'm sure they're good players. But it's certainly... Do you know what I mean? So I think what we're looking at here is, what can we do to, if we do have a big injury issue next season, give ourselves more depth? Because Jota will be the one being asked to step up if we didn't get a striker, or we had an injured striker, or we kept with Nunes. Salah, I think broadly the backup for him is again Jota. On the left wing, if we would sell Diaz, we would need another left winger, though we can put Wirtz out there for a little while. But I think it would hamstring us. And it does just come, I guess it's a luxury concern because you brought in Florian Wirtz and Frimpong and those guys. But I guarantee these are going to be questions that they're asked. Maybe I'm overlooking something. Maybe Tyler Morton is that guy in midfield, or maybe Bajcetic is the guy in midfield, or maybe Trainoni is that guy in midfield. And we see them all in the archetype that we want in our midfield. And that's great if so. But that's only one position. And I think we will probably see more rotation next season. I've not even mentioned Curtis Jones. Curtis Jones was fantastic in terms of rotation and covering many different areas last season. If we were to have had to move on Andy Robertson and Tsimikas in one summer, I get the feeling that someone like Curtis Jones would have been pushed back into a position where he would have, essentially been solving an internal problem for Arne Slot at Liverpool. Because that's what it seems as if Arne Slot prefers to do, rather than bring him from the outside, having to train them up and then bring them to a kind of a tactical boil, if you like. I think he prefers to slip a midfielder in there and strengthen in numbers and the shape and those kind of things. You see that in his substitutions, you see that in his shaping and all those kind of things. But let me know what you guys think. What do you enjoy about, obviously there's the big signings, but where is there depth? Is there enough depth for another title charge? And when I'm saying another, I mean, if we hadn't have achieved what we did last season, I think a lot of people would be going into this summer feeling quite content. So we got in top 4. We crashed out of the Champions League to PSG, the eventual winners. We had a relatively good cup run and then a poor cup run. But then on top of that, how would we feel? We'd probably be going, right, can we push for a title this season? And we might be more nervous if Trent had left and Diaz was pushing to leave and all those kind of things, if we weren't in our pomp. And one thing I'm certainly warning against, or kind of would always go against, would be this idea of, oh, Liverpool have got a title, therefore they're strong. I'm always against going on results-based whatever. Does that make sense? So I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll chat to you guys in a little while. Much love.